Good morning, Kim Goldman.
Good morning, Jackie MacDougall.
All right, I've been bugging you about this particular show for months.
I know, you're a pain in my tush.
So I want to get very, 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 very real, as much as I hate when people say, oh, let's get real. So
Hashtag real talk.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about the stuff that nobody wants to talk about, because we did a survey through Broadscast, clearly, because this is our show, and asked people if they are prepared. And 80% of the people
Prepared for what?
Prepared for the worst.
Okay.
Prepared for unexpected death, a family crisis, job loss, any big event like that.
Right.
And 80% of the people who took our survey are parents, but 50% of those parents don't even have a will or
Right.
like a designated plan for their children. And so hey, I'm one of them.
Do people have savings?
Like only a little over 20% have more than enough. I have to look at the other number here. Over 20% have absolutely no backup at all. Let me look at this.
Because what do they say? You're supposed to have like 6 months of
Crazy.
savings.
But before we get to all this, I want to introduce our first guest, Susan Christopher, who is, they always say hug the mic because we get in trouble for backing up too much. You are an estate planner, family, how do you, family attorney.
I'm a licensed attorney, and my specialty is estate planning, so wills, trusts, living wills, things like that.
And you do a lot of advocacy for education as well.
Yes, I do.
Which is awesome.
Yes.
So you see this all the time. And you and I have had these conversations like even a few years ago when we first met that, so if we go, we ask them, do you have the financial means to cover expenses in the case of job loss or difficult personal circumstances? Oh, my computer just went crazy. Wow.
What?
Sorry,
What's
little Mac there. And barely, like more than enough was 22%, some 55%, and no backup, 23%.
Well, I think we're kind of in a time where it's hard to have a backup. I mean, everybody, maybe we're on the upside of our economy being in a dismal place for so many years, but I think people are trying to put money aside. I mean, it's hard to save and plan for the future.
Yeah, but I mean, not only are we going to talk to Susan today, we're also going to talk to Denisha Danielle. She's also the host of Home Free on Fox, but she's a financial expert. And so between the two of you, we're going to really tackle what we need to do today. And I think it will cost less money and time than people think. I think it's so overwhelming and intimidating. I know it was for me, and I've only done half of what I'm supposed to do. But I think there are a lot of people out there. I talked to someone yesterday who is a teacher, mother of 3, like one of those uber responsible, the way she comes across, like she's got her stuff together, and she's like, yeah, I have none of that, or an accident I heard about the other day where a dad was in the ocean and had an accident. He doesn't have any even health insurance.
Right.
So there's and he's got homes and businesses, and we think that everybody else, that we're the only one, and so it's tough to kind of like step up and do this. But let's talk to you about this.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to lie. I didn't always come from a position of strength here. When you said, being a grown-up, I started my estate planning practice, and it took me 5 years to create my own estate plan.
Wow.
So I come from a place of understanding that it is a pain in the tush to get it done. It's one more thing on your list to do. Mm-hmm. It is painful for many people to talk about who would raise your kids if the worst were to happen.
Right.
No one wants to have that conversation. No one thinks anyone else is good enough for your kids. Mm-hmm. And so putting those kinds of things on paper is a painful and difficult process. And so whether it's just lack of time or lack of resources, I don't have the money to create an estate plan, or whether you just emotionally don't want to have those conversations, people put it off and put it off and put it off. But I got into the business because my father-in-law actually passed away suddenly overnight, went to bed and didn't wake up. And he had prepared very well for his family financially. But what we had to do was like getting into his mind and piecing together files. Well, is this insurance policy still active? Did he intend for this to happen? What did he want for his funeral? And I'm sorry, but the funeral business is a business also.
Right.
So you're going through one of the worst moments of your life, and someone's sitting across a table from you saying, you really don't love this person if you stick with the plastic urn. You need to pay $3,000 for the nice marble urn for your fireplace. But no one...
I'd like to publicly say that I don't need the marble.
But it's one of those things that if you've had those conversations ahead of time, it's so freeing as a family member. And I actually, through that process, my main takeaway was that it could be the most loving thing you could do for your family to prepare that way.
Right. Jackie and I talked about this a lot. The only reason that I have a will or trust, I don't even know what it is, was because my very smart friend Lisa told me I needed one. And she was surprised that as a single parent that I didn't have a plan in place. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't have conversations with my dad. I have a trail on my computer. It says Kim's document, and here's the account for this, here's the account for that, here are my passwords. And if anything, God forbid, happens to me and someone came into my home,
my Match.com,
they would know. They would know how to find my life. I mean, it's not a surprise. My brother was killed 20 years ago, and when we had to go into his home and try to figure out where his bank accounts were, did he have any insurance, how to get into a safety deposit,
and he was 25 and single.
Yeah,
so that's even more that's simplified when it comes to estates.
But you have no idea until you're faced with it, really, how hard it is when someone dies.
Right.
And I remember, ironically, and then we'll let you talk, Susan, that after my brother died, I remember my dad coming into my room and saying, "We bought burial plots because we want to be buried with Ron. Do you want us to purchase one for you?" And I lost my mind, because how could he have this conversation with me? Well, all these years later, I don't have one, and there's no room now left to my brother. I still have yet to do anything about it, but you don't think about that until you're faced with it, and how hard it is to then try to rebuild after the fact.
Well, and that's just it. It's hard to have those conversations, especially if you're in a painful moment, but it's normal. But if you can push past the uncomfortableness, it is so freeing to have had those conversations, to feel like there's some peace of mind in knowing where your kids will be. I have to commend you. The first thing I talk to all my clients about, I call it my one pager.
Yeah.
But it's there's a couple of secure online options you can use, or just creating a printed out version of what accounts you have, what life insurance policies, what their account numbers are, what your passwords are.
Yeah.
Nobody likes to write any of that down or have it in a central location. But I mean, when my father-in-law died, we had to figure out what the voicemail passward was. And you can usually figure those things out. It's usually, this one, let's try it with an exclamation point. Usually there's a formula
Passwords
to keep trying. Yeah, exactly. But it's just so much easier if you're going through one of the worst moments of your life to not have to think about the administrative end of things. It's hugely
I ended up doing we want to actually, let's go back and do this. What is the difference between an estate, a will, a trust, from layman's terms, all these terms
that are so intimidating.
Yeah. Give us a layman's
estate
version.
plan. I'm like, I have this small house. It just sounds bigger.
Right. So, the most simple thing that you can do, and if you have kids, you should do a will. That's the bottom line. That's where most estate attorneys will set out custodial if you need to have a guardian in place. The will, though, still has to be probated. It has to be filed in court when you die, and there can be a waiting period involved in that, which would have to happen in the case of guardianship anyway. But in terms of financial situations, you wouldn't have to wait if you have a trust. So a trust is something you create now. I call it my empty stew pot. I have this big, gorgeous, green Le Creuset, stew pot that I like to have out in the fall. But until I start putting anything in my stew pot, it just looks nice. It doesn't smell good in the house. It doesn't feed my family. So you have to put things into a trust, and a trust is a financial device to sort of avoid that whole waiting period, avoid the extra taxes. It stays with your kids or it stays with your spouse so that you don't have to go through all that extra probate time in court and have all of your finances made public.
Do you have to have both?
For guardianship, and I always create a will even just as an extra
Like a boilerplate.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Just to have, just in case something somehow didn't get put in the trust, or we missed something, or somebody's got, a question about something. There's always a will in place. As
Okay,
an
so the
extra
will is
protection.
public, so that's all public record. The trust is private.
Yes.
Okay.
Your trust stays private. That's where you title your house. Anyone who owns a home in California should have a trust. Your title to your home should be in the name of your trust. That's the first big thing to put into your trust. And then you lay out how you want the money for your children to be handled, who your trustee would be is the one who handles that. It's where you say what you want done with your home. It's where you say what you want done with any of your assets, any other monies, how you want that managed or gifted out.
So people think that, you talked about the house, but people think if they rent, they don't have to have any of this. Does it change if you're a renter?
If you're a renter and you have significantly less than $100,000 in assets, then having a will is fine. But if you have anything that just might add up to more than $100,000, you really should have a trust in place. It's just easier.
Okay. And assets includes like household items, so furniture.
Yeah.
Right. I think people forget that. Everything in your house
that you own, if it were to add up to close to $100,000, your car, all of that becomes part of your estate. If you think there's any chance that any of your bank accounts, whatever is going to add up to more than $100,000.
Yeah, nope.
Or if you own a house, if you have life insurance policies and you have children, things like that, you're going to want to have a trust in place, even if you think you're broke right now, because that sets them up for having that money managed for them.
I remember when I sat down and did my trust, that I had to come up with a plan of who the trustee was going to be. And then if God forbid something to that person, I had to have a backup. It was like 3 layered. And I remember calling my best friend afterwards. I'm like, well, congratulations, you now own my life. And she's like, what? And I said, you just became.
Right.
So that was hard.
I noticed she now determines where you put things in the house.
But even having those, like, who do I trust? Who do you trust to handle your finances is often different than who you would trust to raise your children. So,
and I hear it shouldn't be the same person.
That is.
Make sure you're close to the mic.
That's a personal question. So I actually usually recommend the opposite. I feel like if unless you know the person you're giving your kids to is a terrible financial person and they can't keep their house or something like that.
Right. I probably not the best choice for your kids.
Right. If you trust someone with your children, more likely than not, you can trust them with your finances. I think when it's two separate people, it can get a little complicated because then as they're raising your children, if they want to get some money for braces or they want to switch their school and they're having to go ask permission and get money, that can lead to conflict. So I'm always looking down the road at potential conflicts. And when money is involved, people get weird.
Yes.
It is the craziest. People who don't care about money, all of a sudden when someone dies, they get weird about money because it becomes an emotional thing.
Right.
And so I try and avoid that. So I generally, it's very personal, and I have clients who've chosen to keep it separate. I usually recommend if you can to keep the money with your kids.
So let's talk about the kids for a second. So if you don't determine a guardian for your child or children, what happens to them?
The court decides it.
The court decides. So
If
even
it's
though you
not-
may want them with, Uncle Joe, they're going to determine that it's,
Right.
somebody else, the grandparents or something.
So in California in particular, there's always going to be, they're in favor of family doing that. So, there's a chance you've already decided someone that the court would also decide, but do you want that decision in your court's hands?
Right.
If the most likely person would be grandparents and you don't feel comfortable with your kids being raised by your parents for some reason or other, or just so that they can still stay grandparents, then you want to have that laid out ahead of time so that you're the one making the decision.
Now, is there a chance that the kids would end up with the state until they make this determination?
There's a chance.
I mean, I can't
There's a
even
chance.
imagine kids going through something and then they're taken away.
Right. It's not as likely if someone's already taking care of them because the state doesn't want to take on that burden. I mean, that's the honest truth. But depending on what the situation is or how close family is and how long it takes for them to get here if something unexpected happened or something like that, they could get into the system and they could have to wait for that decision.
So what happens if there's a situation where there's a divorced family and the custodial parent designates where they want that child to go, and then the non-custodial parent isn't the named person? So what rights does a non-custodial parent have over where that child ends up, despite what's listed and written into the trust or
Parents
the will?
will always have first choice, but that will have to get that if there's a conflict, it would have to get litigated out in court with a probate judge.
Right.
So yeah, it's definitely something. Even if it means going back to court, I would recommend trying to do that ahead of time and getting that worked out. And mediators are always great for questions like that because they can help have some of those difficult conversations without maybe having to go all the way through the court process.
I think it's a misnomer if you put everything into the trust that it's going to happen exactly the way that you wrote it, because like you said, for probate, if your will ends up in probate, can't people contest, or they can file liens, or they can argue what you've done, and that's maybe why sometimes it gets held up?
It can get held up. The wills can get contested much more easily. Trusts are much more difficult to contest, private. And I always write in a no contest clause, which most attorneys do as well, so that if you have a brother or another, spouse or something, and they argue what they're getting from the trust, that they automatically lose their share. And that would have to maybe end up in court, but the reality is if they try and sue and want something different,
they lose what was actually
could
designated.
lose what they were supposed to get.
I'm going to have to check to see if that's in mine.
It probably is.
But, so, there are lots of do-it-yourself, will, online, cocktail napkin. I mean, how much do you have to go through an attorney to get this stuff done? Is it really advisable, or would it hold up otherwise?
Not that we're trying to put you out of business.
No, because we want to send people your way at the end. But
so there's two answers to that. One is I absolutely, because I'm passionate about people getting it done, I would rather you go on LegalZoom or something else and just get it done. I think the downside of using a service like that, even just going to a paralegal, is they can't counsel you through the process. They can't talk you through and help you understand what each document is for. They can't, there is a value add to an attorney. Now, I'm not going to lie. A lot of estate planning is very sort of boilerplate language. It's all based on case law. There's not a ton of difference between me and the guy who's charging $4,000 for his estate plan in LA. But I think that or LegalZoom, our papers are all going to look the same. But I think there's a lot of value in talking it out with someone who cares and can walk you through it.
When I did mine, I did not use LegalZoom for different reasons, but I did a little research to see if I could do it myself. It's an inside joke, sorry. I was confused by it, to be honest with you. I didn't know how to answer all the questions. So when I sat down with someone, the ability to talk to him and have him explain it to me and really vet it out, and he actually sort of became a little therapeutic for me, because I was like, wait, oh my gosh, and it was really hard, and so to have someone kind of help me not be so emotional about the decisions I was making was really helpful, and so I can see the benefit of having someone counsel you literally through that process.
Yes.
Right. And so, I mean, we have to go to break in a minute, but how much would someone expect to pay for just starting as far as getting a will or some of the basics?
The average LA cost for a full estate plan is about $3,500.
Wow.
I am passionate about it being affordable and easy, so mine is significantly less than that. And there are a few attorneys that do it for less than that, depending on where you're at.
Right. And I'm sure other parts of the country and all that.
Yeah.
So can you stay with us?
Yes,
because we would love to, this could be 5 hours. So we're going to take a break. Can we go to break, Peter? All right, we're going to go to break, and we'll be back with Susan Christopher and also Denisha Danielle.